So this is our Sunday morning coffee chat. Got my coffee, I hope you have yours. And today's topic is on emotional eating. And I feel like this is a topic that needs to be talked about anytime you are dealing with nutrition and healthy diet plan. Because I feel like there's a lot of people who deal with emotional eating. And I know from experience, I am one of those people. And emotions seem to be the thing that trigger my poor eating habits the most. And when I was struggling more with binge eating, and this is years ago, when I would struggle with binge eating, a lot of times it was triggered by an emotion, a negative emotion, a sad emotion, whatever. That's generally what would trigger it, and then I would just be on this full out binge for whoever knows how long until I had had enough. So I feel like emotional eating is something that we need to discuss kind of at the start of our new challenge group. So this will be your second week into the program that we're starting. So I'm labeling this one beautifully damaged because I feel like we are all beautifully damaged. We all have damage, whether it be emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. We all have damage, but it doesn't take away from our beauty, and it doesn't take away from our self-worth and the core of who we are. Yes, those things have shaped us into the person that we are, but we are not a product of our past. We are not that person today. With Beautifully Damaged, I wanted to first talk about what emotional eating is. Probably if you are watching this video, you either know what emotional eating is, or you have struggled with emotional eating at some point in your life, or maybe you are currently sitting in that shame of emotional eating. Maybe you found this video because you are at that moment right now. And I want to encourage you that you have the ability to stop your cycles. You have the ability to come out of emotional eating. Now, it's not like a quick fix. I can't just give you something and it's gone. This is something you're going to be battling for a lifetime. And it is something that even I battle with now. Emotional eating is something that I think a lot of us struggle with. And basically, in a nutshell, what it is when we feel something, and instead of dealing with that feeling, that emotion, we turn to food as a coping mechanism. So if we are feeling sad, we'll go to food. If we are feeling lonely, we'll go to food. If we are feeling upset, stressed, frustrated, happy, excited, thrilled, whatever it is, either on, the spectrum of good emotions to like the more negative emotions, they all are kind of the same thing, and we turn it into a food related desire instead of just experiencing that emotion in that moment. Without food, we turn to food to deal with that emotion. So there are a lot of resources out there, and I am just now really diving into several of the resources. This book by Janine Roth is something I'm working through right now, and I'm reading this. So I guess I can say I'm kind of like a recovering food addict, I guess. And I just now found this book, and the things that I'm reading in this book are really resonating with me, and I understand it because that's who I used to be. I used to be obsessed with food, in both binging and in the restrictive way, because that's the thing. A lot of times people think emotional eating, and I haven't mentioned that, a lot of times people think emotional eating is just the excess of food, but it also can be the other way, where you are restricting food and going along the lines of anorexia instead of binging. It is just this accumulation of food disorders that make us emotional eaters. So it can go the other way. Maybe you're feeling stressed and sad, and you withhold food from yourself because that makes you feel in control. That makes you feel powerful. So it goes both ways. So in this book, I'm reading things that I literally thought I was the only one that struggled with. And she has been opening my eyes to the fact that I am just beautifully damaged. I'm not unchangeable. I'm not worthless. I'm not defined by my failures. I am just beautifully damaged. So I wanted to kind of give you guys a couple of pointers that I have been currently using, I have figured out on my own in the past, and some things that I've even been reading about when dealing with emotional eating. So a lot of times our emotional eating episode, whatever it is you want to call it, however you label your issues with food, it generally is started by a trigger. So something happens in your life that triggers this response of food is what I need to help, or withholdal. I don't think that's a word. Me withholding food from myself is the way to deal with this current issue. Okay, so there is an event, something that happens that makes you go to this cycle of eating. Okay, so let's just use the example of loneliness. Okay, so say you're feeling really lonely, and so that's your trigger. The feeling of being alone is your trigger. And so instead of dealing with that feeling of alone, that's Hobbes, by the way. You've probably seen his tail walking around. So instead of dealing with the emotion of loneliness, we go to food to fill that void, to fill that loneliness. Because let's face it, okay? Friends are not perfect. And they hurt us, and they leave us. And people that are not supposed to leave us. And people that are not supposed to hurt us. And that's hard to cope with. That's really hard to deal with. And food doesn't leave you. Food doesn't hurt you that way. Food does not leave you when you need it most. Okay? And these are just thoughts, okay? These are not truths, all right? This is probably what you've heard yourself say. In the end, does food hurt us? Yes. In the end, does food cause other issues? Absolutely. But in this moment, when you're feeling this trigger, this emotion, this is your thought process. Or, I'm going to withhold this food because it's going to make me be the one in control. Because everybody else leaves me. I don't need food anyways. These are thoughts that are triggered by just one emotion, okay? So the biggest thing is you need to know your trigger. So for me, one of my big triggers is when I am getting very, very stressed or very, very frustrated. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not against my daughter, but unfortunately, a lot of times it's with her. She's constantly whining, and I've given her everything that she needs or wants, and it's just not enough, and I'm getting so frustrated. And instead of dealing with my frustration in that moment, I want food. And I have seen myself do this, where I have gotten frustrated and instantly went to eat instead of dealt with my issue, with my frustration. Okay, so number one, you need to know what your trigger is. If at all possible, try to avoid your trigger. Now, that's not always the case. I can't avoid my daughter. I have to handle her. I have to parent her. I have to be involved in her life. So I can't necessarily avoid my trigger, but I can lessen it by acknowledging I'm getting frustrated right now. Let's change the situation. So maybe let's go outside. If we're doing something inside and it is just not working, let's go outside. Let's change the environment. Let's go for a ride. Let's do something. Get me out of that moment of frustration. And a lot of times that breaks the cycle, and that's how I can avoid my trigger, okay? So know your trigger. Avoid your trigger as much as you can. Set yourself up for success. Another thing is you need to have a plan to deal with your trigger. So in those moments of unavoidable triggers, you really need to have a plan set up. For me, when it's with my daughter, it's like I said, let's go somewhere, let's do something, let's go outside, let's go for a walk through our woods. And a lot of times just getting her out of her situation, getting me out of my situation, getting outside, getting that fresh air is enough to calm both of us down, and then that trigger of my frustration is gone. So you need to come up with a plan and literally write it out. And write it out based on different triggers. So if it is, say, visiting in-laws, write what you're going to do if you're starting to notice that you're feeling that kind of stress or frustration or whatever it is. Make a plan. And then the other thing is have grace. Because we are beautifully damaged, which means we are going to fail. We are not going to do this 100% right 100% of the time. So in those moments when we completely blow it and we go for that chocolate or we go for whatever it is that we are feeling like we are craving in that moment that will fix the issue, right? Have grace. Realize that you're human, you're beautifully damaged, you're a work in progress. And so if you do fail gracefully. Pick yourself back up and start again. It's never too late to start again. Don't quit, just keep going. So one more thing I want to leave you with before, because this talk has gone long, and I feel like I could just keep talking about this because this is something that I truthfully struggle with over and over and over, is what would happen if you would allow yourself to feel the emotion that you are triggered by and not turn to food? What would happen? So in my mind, this is what would happen. And let's use loneliness again, just because I feel like all of us have experienced some form of loneliness in our life, right? So let's say I'm really lonely and I'm wanting to turn to food. So what would happen if I just felt that loneliness? What would happen? I would probably cry, right? I might even do the ugly cry where my eyes get all puffy and my face gets all splotchy. And I would cry for maybe 5 minutes. And then I would kind of suck it up. And then what? Then I would go on with my life. So a lot of times, just feeling the emotion seems somewhat scary or uncomfortable, or we don't want to do it. But a lot of times that's the best way to handle it, is to feel that emotion. And I've even done this with my daughter. When I'm feeling frustrated, I've told her, honey, I'm feeling frustrated. Can I just have a couple minutes to myself? And a lot of times she's good. Like, she understands that. And she goes and plays with her toys. I calm down, I get it together, and then we go on with our day. And then I don't have that shame and that guilt and that feelings of, now I've eaten to solve this issue, and now I've created this food monster that now I'm going to have to control and contain. When if I would have just felt that emotion and dealt with it, I could have moved on. I know it sounds scary, and honestly, only in the last couple of months have I really been dealing with my triggers and feeling those triggers. However much uncomfortable and painful and hard and sad they are, if I would just deal with those emotions without the use of food, I get over it a lot quicker. Because now I just deal with that emotion and I'm not dealing with the guilt and the frustration of I've just eaten all of this food and undone 2 weeks worth of hard work. I want to encourage you guys to deal with this emotional eating, because if you don't, you're always going to be in the cycle of overeating, undereating, trying to control your food instead of living in this food freedom. All right? So just remember, you are beautifully damaged. You are beautiful, and you are wonderful, and you can do this. You are not controlled by food. You have the ability to change. So go out there, make those good decisions, and I would love to hear how you guys have either been dealing with your emotional eating, how you've struggled with it in the past and had victories, or even if you are struggling with it currently, I'd love to hear how you're doing. So, till next time, good morning, and I'll see you guys soon.